Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing ex-back success story. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing ex back success story. So if you've been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you need to feel hope. In today's podcast, I'll be reading you an email that I've received detailing an ex back success story. I've been given permission to read this email out, and I've been assured that the main name involved in this story has been changed to protect privacy. Additionally, I've decided to split this into 3 segments to make it easier to focus on. So let's get straight into this, and the first segment is the relationship. So the email reads, I met Emily when I was 28 and at a friend's party. She had this incredible energy that drew me in right away. We started talking and found out we had a lot in common, like a love of hiking and live music. We started dating soon after, and those early years were some of the best times of my life. We'd spend weekends hiking different trails, discovering new music spots, and trying to cook new recipes together. It was fun and effortless. And I think it's just important for me to jump in there that love does feel rather effortless. You know, people will say a relationship takes work. And yes, that's true. It does take work. But true love, when you're feeling a high level of romantic emotional attraction and vice versa with your partner, it's actually really easy. You know, love is easy. If you're finding a relationship a grind every single day of your life, then unfortunately there are challenges within your situation. But anyway, I digress. So the email continues to say, but as time went on, things began to change. When I turned 32, Emily got a big promotion at work. It was a huge deal for her, and I was really proud, but it also meant she was working longer hours and had a lot more on her plate. On the other hand, I was feeling pretty stuck in my job. I wasn't happy where I was in my career, and it started to weigh on me. I'd come home frustrated and tired, and instead of talking about it, I had often just shut down or get snappy over small things. Our arguments started small, about things like chores and what to watch on TV, but they began to escalate. We were both under a lot of stress, and it felt like we were taking it out on each other. The laughter and ease we once had seemed to fade away, and this was replaced by tension and irritation. Now, unfortunately, this is something I hear a lot of, a somewhat slow decline of a relationship, and when action isn't taken, well, unfortunately, you can kind of guess where this is going. So let me continue. So one night, after a particularly nasty fight over something completely trivial, Emily sat me down. She looked exhausted, and I could see that she'd been crying. She said she needed space. She told me she felt like we were drifting apart, that our relationship had become more of a source of stress than support. She said that she loved me, but couldn't keep going the way things were. Hearing her say this was like a punch to the gut. It felt a mixture of shock and sadness, and I felt panic. I didn't realise how bad things had gotten for her. I knew we were struggling, but I didn't see that she was feeling this way. The next morning, I watched her pack her bag, and I was trying to hold back tears. She then went to stay with a friend. In the days that followed, I felt completely lost. The apartment felt empty without her. I missed her presence, her laugh, even our silly arguments. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept replaying the conversation in my head that we last had, wondering how things had got so bad and how I hadn't seen it coming. I felt a deep sense of regret and guilt for not being there for her in the way that I should have been. I spent a lot of time just sitting alone, thinking about where things went wrong. I realised that I'd been so wrapped up in my own issues that I'd neglected Emily and our relationship. I knew I needed to make changes, not just to try and get her back, but to get my own life together. It was a wake-up call, but I knew I had to try and face things head on. So as you can see here, the person who sent me the email is starting to have that light bulb moment where they realise that things have gone wrong that they probably could have prevented going wrong, but sadly they've realised this after the event has taken place. It's always better to try and take action and be someone who is proactive rather than reactive, but sadly a lot of us end up being in that position where we have to be reactive, and sadly this is exactly what has happened in this regard. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second segment of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is the breakup. So the email continues. So I knew I needed to try and get my life together, but I didn't know where to start. I didn't want to go to a therapist, it just didn't feel right to me. Instead I started looking for other ways to help me try and get through this. One night I was scrolling through YouTube when I stumbled upon a podcast by this guy named Vincent, in brackets, that was you. Thank you for the plug. He started talking about relationships, self-improvement, and dealing with breakups. I decided to give it a listen. His advice was straightforward and relatable. He talked about taking responsibility for your own happiness and making positive changes in your life, not just for someone else, but for yourself. I started listening to your podcast every day. They became a kind of lifeline to me. You have this way of breaking things down that makes sense and don't feel too overwhelming. One of the biggest takeaways for me was the importance of self-reflection and taking action to improve my own life. I decided to make a plan. First, I started journaling every day. I wrote about my feelings, what I missed about Emily, what I thought had gone wrong in our relationship. It was hard at first, but it helped me get through a lot of my thoughts, get them out of my head and onto paper. It was like a release. Next, I started focusing on my career. I was unhappy in my job and knew I needed a change. I signed up for a course in a field I'd always been interested in, but never pursued. It was challenging, but it gave me something positive to focus on. It felt good to be working towards something again. Despite all of these efforts, it was still incredibly hard. There were days when I felt like I was making progress, and then there were days when I felt like I was back at square one. I missed Emily every day, and there were moments when I felt like I would never be happy again, but I kept pushing forward one day at a time. Now reading this is incredibly hard. Anybody who were to read this, or for you listening to this, it's so hard and challenging to hear somebody clearly crumbling in their life. Now, of course, you'll know by today's podcast title that this does have an upward trend coming and something that you might refer to as a happy ever after, or certainly that is what we hope for. But during this time, the person who wrote me this email was going through a lot of trauma. You might be able to relate with this. Okay, so just try and get in your mind that somebody is going through something which is quite likely similar to yourself, but they have come out the other side, as we are about to find out. And I think it's really important just to realise that you might be going through a challenging time now, but there is always hope. Now, I can't guarantee you'll get your ex back, but what I can say is that there's every chance that if you don't get them back, you can find someone even better. And this is why we really need to remember it's about us and our fulfillment, our satisfaction and our happiness. It doesn't matter whether it's with an ex or with someone else. But in a general sense, if you're feeling that there's no hope for you and your ex, well, it sounds very much like this person felt the same, and yet we're about to find out how it's actually progressed and therefore how it could possibly work out for you as well. Interestingly, he mentions he was doing some journaling, and this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and I think I might actually make my own journaling product. So if you feel that journaling is something which might be able to help you, maybe you don't know much about it right now, well, let me know in the comments your thoughts on this, because I'm thinking about making a journaling product, which I think could really help people. I'm a big believer in journaling, and I've not made a product before in this way, but I think it is something that people find helpful, and I think I could put my own spin and take on that type of thing to really help people. So it was interesting he emailed that he had been journaling, because it's just got me thinking about something I could do to probably help the community. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast, the final segment of today's email. And point number 3 is getting back together. So this is the part of the email that we all want to hear, the bit that is going to hopefully give you that direction to show what can possibly take place. So let's continue with the email. The first few months were incredibly hard. There were days when I felt like I was making progress, and then there were days where I felt like I was back at square one. But I stuck with it. Slowly, I started to feel more like myself again. I was making strides in my new career path, and I felt more confident and happy. About 8 months of no contact, out of the blue, I received a text from Emily. It was just a random message about a TV show we used to watch together. Now, I just want to jump in here. I've said this time and time again. You know, if and when your ex-dumper reaches out to you, it's not likely to be this long, grand, Disney-esque message saying how much they miss you, saying how much they love you, saying how much they want to get back together. No, it's much more likely to be something which sounds really random. And I think I've actually given examples before of when it's connected to things such as TV or music. It's something which is somewhat common. And in this email, once again, we see this playing out again, the indirect, direct approach. It's indirect, but it's not actually saying what they're thinking. What they're thinking is, I miss you. You don't send a text to someone that you don't need to unless on some level you're wanting to communicate and therefore on some level you miss them. Okay, so it's indirect because the reason that they want to reach out to you is because they miss you, but they're not actually saying the truth. In this instance, it's about a TV show. That's why it's indirect. Now, it's direct because it's directly to you. So we call it the indirect, direct approach. So the email continues, my heart raced when I saw her name on my phone. I took a deep breath and replied casually, keeping it light and friendly. We exchanged a few more texts over the next couple of weeks. It was nice to hear from her, but I didn't want to rush things. We continued to chat sporadically, and eventually she suggested meeting up for a coffee. I was nervous, but also excited. When we met, it was a bit awkward at first. We talked about what had happened and how we'd both been. I apologised for my part in the breakup, and she shared her own reflections. She told me that she had noticed the changes I'd made, and that she was impressed with how I'd turned things around in that regard. From there on in, we started seeing each other more regularly. We took things slowly, rebuilding our relationship step by step. We made an effort to communicate better and address the issues that had caused problems before. It wasn't always easy, but we were both committed to making it work. Over time, our connection grew stronger. We found a new balance and appreciation for each other. It felt like we were building something even better than we had before. Looking back now, I realised that the time apart had been necessary for us both to grow and understand what we truly wanted. Now we're back together and I feel stronger than ever. The breakup was one of the hardest things I've ever been through, but it forced me to make positive changes in my life. And in the end, it brought us back together, better I hope, than before. If you believe that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description.